All right. Great job, praise team. We appreciate your time that you've put into leading us in worship today. My name's Andy Frazier. I'm a pastor of Grace Baptist Church all the way over in Summerton, Alabama. That's not too far from here. But I am glad, like Mark said, I'm glad you're here. We've been praying for every single person who's going to be attending in person, or if you're joining us online. We're grateful for those who are joining us digitally as well. What we wanted to do to begin our time together is start with a conversation. Mark mentioned earlier, this is not just a conference we wanted to facilitate, but rather an experience. We know we're all in the same room, and we're not here just to have a sage on the stage tell you stuff so that you just compile all this information and leave without real help. So what we're going to do is begin our time together right now with a discussion. We're going to have some guys come up here and join us. Going to introduce each of them real quick. Scott Kindig, why don't you come up here? Scott comes all the way from the nation state of Georgia, right? Long way away. And what's your title again, Scott?
Lead navigator for denominee.
All right. Lead navigator for denominee, right? Okay. All right. And Joël, why don't you come up here? Joel's going to stay on the stage when we're finished because he's got something he's going to share. Joël comes all the way from San Antonio, Texas. He's the founder of Summit Ministries. We'll share a little bit about that in just a minute. And then we have Ken Adams. Ken Adams is at Crossroads Church there in Noonan, Georgia. And he's also the leader, founder, and the boss at Impact Ministries who make disciples. So that's what we're here to talk about, is making disciples, right? So here's how I thought we would begin our discussion together. Mark mentioned earlier, we're glad to be in the same room. And not only those of you who have come to participate, but those who are leading as well. We're excited to be here. It's nice to be in person with people in the same room, and it's comfortable enough that people don't have this fear or anxiety that we had. So guys, here's what I want you to do. Just take a minute to share anything about yourself you wanted to, and tell us why you're glad to be here, maybe what you're expecting your time here.
So, introduce yourself first, you said? Okay. All right. So my name's Ken Adams, and so I pastor a church in Noonan, Georgia, called Crossroads Church, and been there 32 years. And so almost 32, be 32 this June. And so graduated from Southwestern Seminary, and God gave me the opportunity to go plant a new church there. And so we've been there for 32 years. We're swinging at it really hard. And one of the things that we really want to do is that we want to be a church that's committed to making disciples. And so we've been trying to figure that out. And really the cool thing about our environment is it's been like a laboratory for us. And so we've been able to have really a lot of trial and error, a lot of experimentation, that kind of thing. And so I'm the guy on the panel that will tell you what not to do, okay? And so they probably know what to do, and I can tell you how not to mess it up, all right? So because I've done that a lot. So anyway, it is exciting to be here. And honestly, what's exciting for me is to see what God's doing in the state of Alabama. I mean, you guys may or may not know this, but what you're experiencing right here today, maybe one of the only state conventions anywhere that is promoting a conference on disciple making. And so let me just tell you right now that that is leading the way among our denomination, man. So I'll just tell you, man, you got some guys in here that, as Mark said, he's been dreaming about this and planning this, and it's been fun for me to sort of have a side seat to what's happening here, because I've been able to hang out with these guys for a while, and just to see how this is beginning to happen. And it was, Daniel, I think we said this was all kind of underground for a while, and that's kind of coming above ground, man. So anyway, I'm thrilled to be here, man. Looking forward to it.
I was gonna say, if you don't know what you're doing and I don't know what I'm doing, we're depending heavily on Scott here. I'm Joël. I run an organization called Summit Leaders. I do leadership training, leadership coaching, and we're doing a little bit different of a context. We take people into the outdoors. I take guys on outdoor adventures around the world. We go hike to Machu Picchu, 4-day on the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu. We'll climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And we do it normally, you do it in a context like this, but we do it kind of Jesus style while we're walking along the trail. And one of the things I found that's fascinating is I'll bring, high impact, like, very well-known speakers on these trips. And after the trips, I would quiz people. I would send out a little, not quiz, but a little survey about what was the most impacting thing on the trip. And none of them ever mentioned what the speaker said. What they mentioned was a conversation they had with somebody, a peer of theirs, another pastor of theirs, a business leader on the trail. And it was so potent to me what discipleship looks like when the formula we use is something my friend Mark Batterson came up with. He said, change of pace plus change of place equals change of perspective. And you've probably seen that even coming to a conference like this, just getting out of your normal weekly routine and getting here. My prayer for you guys over the next 2 days is that that's what you'll get. I mean, most of us we just kind of need to be reminded or get a new perspective on what we already know. So my prayer for you guys is that you'll get maybe a different perspective on where you're at right now, what God's got for you. And yeah, that's basically the essence of what I do. And I'm a teaching pastor. I travel around the country and speak and write books and stuff. And I'm also a teaching pastor at a church also called Crossroads, but that's in San Antonio, Texas. So yeah.
Well, we may be in a lot of trouble if we give the microphone back to Andy. The reality is we all are in a journey learning about it. And so my journey started the first day I went to a discipleship meeting that I'd been invited to, and I was saved in that meeting. And there was another young lady saved in that same meeting, and she and I have been married now for 33 years. So discipleship's a pretty good thing for me. I got a savior, I got a wife, I got a calling. It all happens just bam, bam, bam. And I'm sure that's the way it happened for all of you, right? All of y'all have been personally discipled and you met your wife in a discipleship group, right? Okay, no, all right. Well, I'm the only one. So I probably really shouldn't be up here on stage doing this. But a guy stayed with us for 18 months at 6 o'clock in the morning, every Tuesday morning, with just a group of 3 to 4 people. And believe me, when people tell you there's no such thing as dumb questions, they're wrong, because I asked all of the dumb questions. And I learned that there's a place and a space where you have family, and dumb questions actually lead to good outcomes. And so we're just very thankful for you and your journey. When we do this in rooms like this every now and then, especially when it's primarily pastors or staff, we ask the question, how many of you have been personally discipled by somebody who invested in you over a period of time in sort of a more face-to-face way, rather than a programmed, I'm coming to this event at this time to listen to somebody? How many of you would say, I've been personally discipled by someone in my lifetime face-to-face? That statistic is getting better and better. I wonder why that is. It's because there's a time for the Lord to allow us to step in, to recognize that disciple making is more than a set of classes and more than programming. And we're going to share a little bit based on some of the discussion that we're going to have here today, where we'll see that disciple making isn't just a piece of your growth. It's what brings you into friendship with lost people, influence with them, growth in their life, and then sending them on mission to multiply what Jesus intended for us to do. So,
you guys ever been somewhere to eat and you didn't realize how hungry you were until you started eating the first part of the meal? That's what's going on here. I don't know about you. My appetite's been whet by what they're talking about. We've experienced, as Mark mentioned earlier, the brakes being put on by COVID. I know all of us, listen, this is a common denominator for all of us. All of us have experienced the unnecessary and necessary changes that this pandemic has brought into our lives and into our ministries. It's affected us, it's affected our communities, it's our families, our schools, but especially how we operate in the local church. So the reason these guys are up here is they have unique personalities and giftings and experiences, and what they bring to the table, I think, is going to touch from different areas for all of us to see how we can look at what has happened, learn from it, and move forward to do what God's called us to do in the area of Great Commission disciple making. So we've seen our lives being forced to change. We've had that forced on us, whether we wanted to or not. We've had to change and adapt. The word pivot has been used more times than I care to admit around our table at our leadership meetings. We've had to change our plans and then change our plans. So that's created maybe this fear, anxiety, worry, and a lot of stress for us. And a lot of us have been able to identify from that maybe we had some chinks in our armor. We had some areas in our ministry where we weren't fulfilling our calling as Great Commission churches to do what Jesus has called us to do. So we're going to have to make some changes. So let's address for just a second. Maybe, Joel, maybe you can start us off with thinking about that. How have you seen this significant change we didn't see coming that has been forced on us? How have you seen that affect leaders from their view of, all right, this was an identifiable culture in our church to now we're having to change to we don't even know what we need to do next?
One of the biggest things I've seen as I've talked to pastors across the country is them saying, I'm not exactly sure who my church is now. They're like, the people I was counting on, they all bailed. And we have this whole new flock of people that have showed up in the middle of this COVID pandemic thing. And I'm like, okay, God, am I supposed to wait for my core people to come back? Or do I work with who you gave me right now? And that's the big question. And a lot of you are nodding your heads and laughing. Yes, apparently that's a common denominator, is who are these people that have showed up at the church now that God has sent? And where were you before? And where are my leaders that were supposed to be with me through thick and thin? They bailed as soon as COVID hit. And I mean, it's a very tricky thing because every church is in a different situation. And I'll tell you some stories. I'm going to do a talk in a minute here. I'm going to tell you some horror. They're kind of funny, actually, but they're funny looking back. But in the middle of it, they're horror stories of things that I've seen churches doing that are just not working out well because of this very idea that they refuse to adapt. And you know what, Jesus, he gave a talk about that, about you don't pour new wine into old wineskins, otherwise you crack. And unfortunately, we've seen a lot of pastors cracking. In Hebrews, Paul talks about how God shakes things up so that what is unshakable, we'll be able to see what's unshakable. And I think we've seen that. And in many ways, it's a blessing, but you've got to wrap your mind around the idea that it's not going to look the same, but that's okay. God never changes, but man, he's always doing things in a different way. And I think that's one of the greatest challenges. I've talked to so many pastors and they're like, this is not what I signed up for. I wanted to be talking to people, not my iPhone. And then seeing 0 watchers. You're like, that's discouraging. That's real discouraging. You're like, well, they'll watch it afterwards, right? No, they're at the lake, right? So we'll be honest here. It's all pastors, right? So I think that's one of the greatest challenges. It's forced us to realize, hey, if we want the new wine, the new way that God wants to work here, we're going to have to be a little bit more flexible than we're used to. And it may not have been what you signed up for. And here's my take on it. We haven't met, so this is going to sound a little bit harsh, but if you hate it that much, like if it's really like stretching you that much, maybe this is your sign that there's other things out there you can do. There's statistics that say that like 60% of pastors say that they would do something else if they thought they could, but there's too far into this journey of being a pastor. And a lot of times God gives us these jolts as an opportunity for us to say, is this really what I'm like? Am I in this for the right reasons? Is this really what I wanted to do? And I think this is a great opportunity for you to evaluate. Is this really what you want to be doing? And if you're, because man, it takes a calling to be a pastor. You can coast a little while when it's easy, but when it gets hard, you get to see, it's that things get shaken and you start to see, okay, is this really the call that's within me? And my prayer is that that's the call within you. And if it is, I want you to be encouraged that, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So we're going to come out really strong on the other side of this. So there's my weird encouragement.
All All right, Scott and Ken get to follow up with Joel telling you probably need to quit. So I don't think that's what he's encouraging you to do, by the way. So I say that tongue in cheek, joking. Obviously, we know it's a calling, and we can't escape the calling. But maybe a sabbatical might be in order if you know this is what you're called to do, and you're feeling burnt out. And this is a great place, maybe to share that with some people that you respect and trust. Hey, pray for me. I'm at a place where I just feel like I have been burning the candle at both ends, and I'm just worn out. I mean, I bet if we ask people to raise their hands right now, like you did a while ago, Scott, how many of you have been discipled? And what about how many of you feel tired, worn out, and ready to be done with all this? I mean, everybody would probably raise their hand. So even the preparation process for why we're here, what we're doing right now, has been hard and difficult, and it's taken a leadership that's been willing to transition and change. This looks different than we envisioned almost 3 years ago that we talked about. So Ken, you and Scott both joked about making mistakes. And I think we all could be honest and say we've all made our share of mistakes in ministry, especially in disciple making. How have we seen maybe some of those past mistakes really become to something that's at the forefront of obvious? This is something we do not need to be doing anymore. This is something we need to change, or maybe something that we need to completely be doing different. As far as our culture has had to shift, how has the negative aspect of what we have been doing that was wrong or should be doing that was different, how has that been identified during this time?
So a couple quick thoughts on that. Maybe go back a little bit to what you shared here a minute ago. So you mentioned the word pivot is kind of been overdone. Well, the only word that's been overdone more than that is unprecedented, right? And so the funny thing about that is that there's never been a pandemic that has took God by surprise. Okay. And I believe this with all my heart, that I believe that churches that are disciple-making churches and that have been committed for the long haul to developing a disciple-making core are the churches that are going to come through this pandemic stronger, because they've been built for that for the last 2,000 years. This is not the first time. If you go back, I say this from time to time, Jesus started the church the way he wanted it. Now he wants it the way he started it. So if you've been doing church the way Jesus started it 2,000 years ago, this isn't the first crisis or the first pandemic or the first persecution that the church has ever gone through. And so if we've been doing it, in fact, I don't know if this is the case everywhere, but if you've been a church that's been making disciples, then your giving probably hasn't been hurt because of the pandemic, because you've got people that are not giving because they're in the room. They're giving because it's a part of their life. It's a part of who they are. It's a part of their DNA to steward their resources for the kingdom. And so I just go back to this fact that, we're in a mess, right? And we're facing a really challenging time, and there's all these things that have changed and we're doing differently and everything. But if all you've done is built it around a crowd event on the weekend, then you probably are struggling to try to figure it out. But if you've got disciples that are committed to making disciples and really knowing what that means, then here's what I can tell you about that, is that disciple making the way Jesus did it is timeless. It's timeless. It works as well today as it did 2,000 years ago. And so we're always looking for what's latest and greatest, but what we really need to do is go back to what's tried and true and what Jesus did 2,000 years ago. And if you work what he told us to do, it still works. It really does. And so what was the second part of your question? Yeah. So I don't know if this is one of the mistakes we've made, but one of the things that we've definitely learned through this pandemic is we want all of our disciple making groups, all of our discipleship groups to really be on mission, right? And out making a difference in the community and all that kind of stuff. And if COVID has done anything for us, is that it has given us sort of a push, if you will, to be more engaged with the community. And so I can't tell you how many opportunities that we've had to feed first responders and to connect with our community in ways that we might not have been so quick to do that in the past. So honestly, it's kind of crazy, but one of the good things that has come out of COVID for us is the fact that our church, and primarily through a lot of our groups and stuff, we've become more engaged in some of our community involvement and community outreach than I believe that we were before. And so that's just, I guess, just one example. So Scott.
If we're looking at mistakes personally, or we're looking at mistakes for the church that are sort of transcendent pre-COVID, one of the things we look for is we've created a social contract for our parishioners. There's a congregation that expects what my duty to you to do is, and I'm going to be kinder than the statistics are. Okay, so between 75 and 80%. Okay, so that's very generous, what I'm saying right now, is how we get people in the door and assimilate them into membership. And then we unintentionally communicate to them that your job as a congregant is to show up, sit and listen and be kind with the pastor, to pray for the missionaries, to tip God, and maybe to hand out a bulletin on Sunday. Man, that room got quiet in a hurry. And it's because we've unintentionally modeled in front of them a model that they see, and we've allowed disciple making to happen in a place that they don't see. Is this making sense? Okay. So disciple making is in a place we don't see, because what we can see is all the programming that we do and all of the leadership that requires. And we sit and we listen, and we know we're supposed to tip God, and we know we're supposed to pray for the missionaries, and we know we're supposed to occasionally serve, and maybe if we're really crazy, go on a mission trip every now and then. And so all of those things that we do, this is the contract that they feel. So when we change the contract by changing what COVID is teaching us, here's a piece of what we did. As soon as COVID started, we knew something had to be different, and we didn't know what to do. So we said, you know what, we're just going to get on Zoom, and we're going to disciple people by distance, because at first that's the only safe place we knew how to do anything. And we had people in our church that discipled about 200 people over the first 6 months of COVID. And they were almost as personally engaged with each other online as they were in person. And they were saying things to us like, I don't have to drive 30 minutes to get to you and then drop my kids off in this room and the rest of my family over in this room. And then I sit at the place where we're doing Bible study together. And now we're gathering up all of our kids again and driving 30 minutes back home. This is better for us in some ways. So I think one of the things that we have to recognize is, first of all, I hope all of y'all bought stock in Zoom on January of last year. And number two, I really do hope that we can understand that face-to-face is not the only delivery system that we have inside of congregational life. And what we're hoping is that we can do a ton of face-to-face mission, but we have to be the Chick-fil-A's that figure out how to do it in a COVID world. We have to be the H-E-B in Texas grocery store that figures out how to do it in a COVID world. We need to be Amazon. We need to figure out the people that figured it out. They won big time in COVID, and the church should have been the biggest winner in COVID. I really believe God gave us COVID for a reason. I don't think that it was COVID that God gave, but what happened was God was doing a reset for us to be able to think differently.
Well, all right, we can probably say amen and go home just after that, right? That's a lot to take in at the very beginning. As a matter of fact, what I wanted to ask you guys now is this. It's a simple question. It may be a little harder to answer. We've come here to a conference, to experts. That's what we normally do at a conference, right? Oh, okay. So in the major leagues, you can make a lot of money batting 2 out of 3. So a normal conference, we go, hopefully we have some people we connect with, we gain information, we get the folder, and we go home and we put the folder on our bookshelf and we go back to normal life. We can't do that now. Having gone through what we've gone through, experienced what we've experienced the last year, we can't just take this folder or the information we've used from an experience like this and just put it on the shelf and go back to business as usual. The status quo will not work from this point forward. How would you encourage the people who are here, whether you're in person or online, how would you encourage them to take advantage of this experience and opportunity over the next couple of days? Not just to gain information, how would you encourage them to let this be a catalyst in your life to implement change in your personal relationship with Jesus, in your family, in your ministry, however you want to take that? But how would you encourage people to let this not just be a conference or a memory, but let it be an experience that really makes a difference?
So I don't, think about that a little bit, but probably, probably the first thing that comes to my mind is relationships, right? And is that what you want me to say? Okay, good. So, so I would think, and in fact, Paul Smith and I were talking a few minutes ago about what we're witnessing here, and what we see is that a lot of the people that are in this room right here are already very connected with each other, and this is a very powerful community that is here and that is growing, and a lot of this community is the result of intentional relationships that some of the people in this room have been very committed to over the last several years. And I don't know everybody here, but I've been around on the outside just enough to know that I see a whole lot of people in this room that I've seen at several other events that I've been honored to be a part of with Alabama State Board of Missions. So I really do believe that that the key to taking what you learn here and not just putting it on a shelf is establishing a relationship, because that keeps going. And that's where you keep learning, and that's where you keep fine tuning. And that's where if you leave here, because you and I both know, you'll be at information overload by the time you're done. And you'll probably forget most of that, And so, but what you won't lose is you won't lose a key connection with somebody that's going to help you get better, and somebody that you can connect with, and somebody that you can grow with. And I mean, honestly, it's like having a workout partner. And if you leave here, if this is the question you're asking, I think if you leave here with somebody else in your corner and you are fighting together and working together, I think I know come out stronger, because in one conference, man, you won't figure it all out. You're gonna get started, and if you come away with a few nuggets of truth, that'll be good. But what you really need is you really need community, and you need a network of people that'll help you get there. So, yeah.
I completely agree with that. That's what I've seen on my outdoor adventures. I mean, I've taken well over 1,000 people on different hikes. We've taken some very prominent Christian leaders with us. And like I said, on those surveys, nobody ever mentions what the Christian leader said. They mentioned what somebody that was hiking with them, the relationship they formed. I'll never forget. I've got 2 guys that are still in contact. One's a pastor of a Baptist church in Little Rock, Arkansas. Another one's a pastor of a wild, charismatic church in Prescott, Arizona. And they connected on that trip. And he said, I never would have rubbed shoulders with that guy apart from this experience. And he said, we have been such an encouragement to each other through the years. So, whatever happens up here, I'm sure it'll be solid and good. But the thing you're going to probably take away is if you invest some time in making a relationship here with somebody. And I mean, again, the network that's already here. I mean, I think about the reason I'm here is because Robert right here reached out to me years ago and basically just decided, he called me and said, hey, I'm going to be your friend. I was like, oh, cool. Okay. So maybe you just need to find somebody and be like Robert and say, hey, I'm going to be your friend. Tell me about you. So I agree completely with it.
How many of you, Robert has called you and said, hey, I'm going to be your friend? How many of you have done that? Okay, there you go. All right. So pretty much all we have to do is meet Robert on this goal if you haven't, and then you're going to go home with a valuable relationship. What I would want to say to you is listen for those moments where you hear something that like lights up your soul just a little bit, and make sure that when you're taking notes on that you highlight it so that you won't forget to go back and say, there was a thing a guy said in a place and man, it was powerful. I wish you'd been there. But you can't find it because you don't go back and like catalog the moments that either somebody in the hallway, and it's most likely to happen at a mealtime or something like that, but catalog the moments. It might not be anybody that's on the stage or that's leading in some capacity. It might be something that's said somewhere else. But when something lights up your soul, make note of that and let the Holy Spirit of God speak to you about what that is, because that is not an accident when that happens. That's a God moment. And we need to, man, if we don't hear God when he speaks and we don't treasure that, we are getting treasure and burying it in a field and forgetting where we put it. We need to pull it out and bring it up over and over again.
Well, you guys get 5 out of 5 stars. Would recommend on all of those answers right there. The whole vision process and planning process and prayer and all the prep work that's gone into this experience has been exactly for the purpose they just mentioned. We didn't want a room full of people who felt like they were part of a crowd. We want an experience where you can react, relate to, and connect to others in the same room. And here's what's fantastic about this. You don't get this at a conference. You don't get what you're hearing being spoken or addressed. But here's the other thing that you're not going to get. You're going to get the opportunity today and tomorrow to interact with these guys. It's not just they're going to give a talk and be a keynote speaker and walk off the stage and be hidden from everybody. Hopefully you're not, but they're not. I know them well enough to know that. But they're going to be in the round tables with you. They're going to be out in the lobby, striking up conversations. And Robert is definitely going to walk up to somebody and say, I'm going to be your friend. I guarantee that's going to happen. So that's what we have prayed about, and we feel like that's needed now more than ever. I mean, we need to know we have somebody in our corner. We need to know we have somebody on that journey with us. And as Joel said, it may be somebody who is the First Church of Big City who connects with, Mount Hebron West #3 in, the middle of nowhere. So that can happen here at this conference in a way that it's not going to happen anywhere else. The other thing that we wanted to happen here is we want each and every one of you, and including all of us who are going to be up on the stage here, to come away with a greater love for Jesus and the mission he's called us to make disciples. I mean, ultimately, that's what we want. We don't want to just leave and say, hey, that was a good conference, and we're looking forward to whatever experience is next. We want you to be able to leave from this time to be refreshed, to be encouraged, and be better equipped to go and do what God's called you to do. So here's the last question. I think we're close to running out of time. Over or under? Toilet paper, over or under?
Over.
Over. Anything else is satanic.
Yeah, over.
Just make it. See, we're all on the same page here. So, yes, that's true. Yes, that is true. You're going to laugh. You're going to cry. You may be crying while you're laughing, while you're here. You're going to have some very interesting moments. You're going to have probably some awkward conversations because I know some of the people in this room are going to be talking to you. Yeah. You're going to hear some things from the stage that are going to come from all ends of the spectrum of experience and gifting and passion and where somebody is. But I guarantee you, you're going to leave this place in a better place personally to be able to take your church and wherever God has called you to lead, to be able to make disciples better. So you guys have anything you want to say, just kind of encouraging before we let Joël take the stage?
So when Paul was defending his apostleship, he looked at the people in the church at Corinth, and he just said, listen, I'm not trying to shame you, but you've had many guides in Christ, but you've not had many fathers. You've not had many spiritual parents. And so if disciple making is anything, the way that we watched Jesus do it is he modeled for us what it's like to do disciple making as family, not just as program. And that what we're praying for is to see generations. If we go into the Psalms, we could pull back out, Psalm 127, we could say, listen, there's a tree planted by rivers of water, and then you can take and look and just go, all of a sudden, wait a minute, what's happening in this passage is there's generations after generations after generations. The only thing on this planet that is resilient above all is family. No matter whether we're functional or dysfunctional, family keeps happening. And God created disciple making to be that metaphor prior to the church coming onto the scene, where God was with people in the garden. And we see this happening with David and his mighty men. We see it happening all over Scripture. And Paul just wants to remind us that this is a family thing. And so we want to encourage you with that.
So I'll just add one thing that I think kind of what I'm able to bring to the table here is just a lot of time trying it, just a lot of experience doing it, and regardless of how smart you are, how intelligent you are, anything like that. I mean, just when you do something long enough, you learn something, right? You just learn something out of it, and experience gives you a little something that you can share, whatever. And one of the things that I would say early on as a church planner is, and I knew that my job was to lead the church to fulfill the mission of Jesus Christ. And I wasn't really 100% sure how to do that or what that was. And my heart was right, and I was trying to figure it all out. And so I went to every conference that you could find. I mean, I really did. And so, man, 1 year into it, I was in California at Saddleback. And then 2 years into it, I was in Chicago at Willow Creek. And then every conference I could go to, everything John Maxwell did, I went. I mean, all of it. It was crazy. And I finally, Lord just sort of directed my path. And I finally went to this conference that was put on by an organization called Sun Life Ministries. And a guy got up and he started training and speaking. And all he talked about was the life of Christ. That's all he talked about, was how to do ministry according to the life of Christ. And I left that conference with more freedom in ministry than I ever had. And I realized that what I needed to spend my time, energy, and effort doing was not trying to figure out how Saddleback did it, not trying to figure out how Willow Creek did it, not trying to figure out how whatever, name it, church you want to name it. I just needed to figure out how Jesus did it. And what really blew my mind is when I realized that, you know what, is that if we do it the way Jesus did it, you don't have to be a off the chart, highly gifted entrepreneurial leader. You can just be a fisherman. And if your mission, if you're the God of the universe and your mission is to make disciples of all nations, you're not gonna ask them to do something that is so difficult and so complicated and so hard that only a handful of people are going to figure it out. You're going to give them a plan that is so simple, untrained, ordinary men can figure it out. And that has set me free because I'm just a knucklehead. I am. I'm just an old knucklehead. But here's what I can tell you. If you do it the way Jesus did, you don't have to figure it out. You just have to make it work in your culture and your context. So I would just tell you, man, the thing that excites me about being here is these guys that I know. What I know is that this is not a conference that says, come hear how Crossroads does it, or come hear how, you name your church does it. What I love about being here is I know these guys are all saying, come hear how Jesus did it. Because if you do it the way Jesus did it, I don't care where you are. It works in San Antonio. It works in Atlanta, Georgia. It works everywhere. If you do it the way Jesus did it.
Amen. Joel, good. All right. So, well, you guys are awesome. Special might be a word. Yeah. I feel like the teacher in class, like you're dismissed, so thank you guys.